And we are deeply committed to building the political power to break the iron grip that the dirty energy industry has on energy policy in this country. Climate science is well documented. The evidence is clearer every day. Fierce supercharged hurricanes, unprecedented wildfires, and record-breaking heat waves. We are running out of time. We must take bold action today to avoid the deepening catastrophic effects of climate chaos. The good news is that Representative Gabbard's Off Fossil Fuels for a Better Future Act lays out the path forward. The OFF Act is the strongest and most visionary piece of climate legislation ever introduced in Congress. And it was drafted with critical input from the environmental justice community. It will move us to 100% clean renewable energy by 2035, and 80% of the transition will take place in the first 10 years after it's passed. The OFF Act ends oil and gas subsidies, and it closes offshore tax breaks for corporations. This is going to create a substantial pot of money for a just transition and for clean energy research. The bill halts fossil fuel projects and bans oil and gas exports. The bill will create thousands, millions of jobs, and it's going to protect public health. Food and Water Watch pledges to do everything that we can to make the OFF Act the law of the land. We will do this for our children and for future generations. It's our moral obligation. We're organizing in communities from coast to coast to build support for the OFF Act and to enact bold policy, town by town, city by city, state by state. But we need outspoken and courageous elected representatives to demand urgent action. And that really describes Representative Gabbard. We are thrilled to be working with her and the other co-sponsors of the bill to make this act a reality. I'm so pleased to introduce Congresswoman Gabbard.
Aloha, good morning. Thank you, Winona and Food and Water Watch. Your presence, your activism, you are a force to be reckoned with, and I appreciate very much the grassroots work that you're doing in pushing this legislation forward. It's great to see so many of my colleagues signing on to this legislation. We're here today because we need more support for it. The Off Fossil Fuels for a Better Future Act will put our country on a pathway to replace fossil fuels with 100% clean energy generation and use by 2035. This is a bill that it touches me in a personal way because it was largely driven and based on legislation that was passed in my home state of Hawaii, the first state to set 100% clean energy goal. We're already seeing that many counties in my state are already ahead of the benchmarks they had set for themselves. The island and county of Kauai, for example, on most days is already running on over 90% clean energy generation during the day. So they are far ahead of where they even expected to be at this point. But places like Kauai, places like my home state of Hawaii prove that this is not only possible, it is already happening. So for those who say that these kinds of aggressive goals are too difficult, don't have a close touch on reality and what we can do with today's technology and where we need to go. Given the latest natural disasters that we've seen ravaging so many states across the country, whether it be hurricanes or wildfires, dramatically rising sea levels, negative impacts on our environment, record high temperatures over this summer. All of these things place a bright spotlight on the urgent and devastating consequences of climate change. We can't keep waiting around and just pointing fingers at the problem. Now is the time for action. The OFF Act would transition the United States towards 100% clean energy, stimulate our economy, support our working men and women, and protect our environment for this generation and generations to come. It will increase our competitiveness by investing in clean energy technologies, job and training programs, and it will improve the health and well-being of the American people and our planet from the toxic pollutants that have been devastating communities across this country for far too long. Perhaps most importantly, this bill is not about moving just one section of our economy forward. It's not about just taking care of one section of our community. It talks about moving our entire country forward without leaving anyone behind. It specifically invests in retraining programs for those like coal miners and others who have been working in industries that have been reliant on fossil fuels, but that now contradict the needs of our planet and our future. We have to work together to make this happen. We can't afford the consequences of failing to act now. If we don't bring people together to solve this challenge, we will fail to protect the future for many generations to come from the devastating economic and environmental consequences of climate change. So that's why we're gathered here today, to urge every single one of our colleagues to come together and protect our planet by committing to 100% clean energy economy together. At this time, I'd like to introduce one of my colleagues here who I'm proud to have as a co-sponsor of this legislation. Nanette Diaz-Barragan has been a climate justice champion for our frontline communities and has fought to protect those who disproportionately suffer from the effects of climate change. Thanks, Nanette, for being here.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for your leadership on this critical issue. I don't need to tell you or anybody else here why it's so important. As the Congresswoman just stated, we are seeing the effects right now. Just in my district, on Tuesday, we had record-breaking temperatures of 104 degrees in Los Angeles. Now, I represent California's 44th Congressional District. It's one of the most heavily polluted districts in the country. Not only do we have the Port of Los Angeles there, but there is a lot of oil drilling. There's a lot of urban oil drilling. These are people's backyards. And I always talk about this as the public health crisis, because we are seeing children walking around with asthma inhalers around their necks. And the doctor's offices, they stock these up because it's so common there, and it's absolutely heartbreaking. So combine the public health crisis and the impact it's having disproportionately as well on communities of color. Combine that with the wildfires, the fires you've seen in California, the hurricanes. And this is it. This is what we need to see. And it's unfortunately that what we're seeing happen is a signal that we need to act now and act quickly to moving off of fossil fuels. And so that's why when Congresswoman came to me and said, would you sign on to this legislation, I said, I'm more than happy to, because this is a fight that we can't let another day pass, and we need to make sure to act quickly. Look, I have spent the last several years fighting an oil company that wanted to come and drill 34 oil and water injection wells, new oil and water injection wells, and that would go out into the Santa Monica Bay along the California coastline. And I said, this is crazy. This is moving in the wrong direction. This is going backwards. And so to see that this piece of legislation will move us forward, to see that we're going to move toward renewable energy and clean energy, that's the way to go. It's going to create millions of jobs, and at the end of the day will help us address the climate impacts that we're seeing happen. So I want to thank all the foot soldiers, all of you here today, Food and Water Watch, everything that you're doing, because we can't do this alone. We need to mobilize and making sure everybody is engaged on this. So thank you so much for having me, and I'm proud to be part of this revolution. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nanette. Now I'd like to introduce my friend, Congresswoman Barbara Lee. She has been such a leader in climate change and climate justice for a very long time, a vocal advocate for ending fossil fuel dependence, mitigating climate change, and preserving natural lands. She fights to ensure the most vulnerable in our community are heard, represented, and protected from pollution and environmental degradation. Thank you so much for your support, Barbara.
Thank you. Thank you. First, I just have to say to you, Congresswoman Gabbard, that this is the best bill ever. Finally, thank you very much. And to my colleague, the Congresswoman Gabbard, thank you very much for your very strong and powerful statement, but also your tremendous leadership. And of course, I want to thank all of you for being here today, because we can't do this without you. You are the wind beneath our wings. You're the leaders, and you're making this happen. You're protecting the planet for all of God's children. So thank you so much. Let me just say a couple things. First of all, we know that it's so important that we raise our voices in the fight to save our planet. And this bill is going to elevate our voices even higher and stronger. The fight will not be easy, but we don't tackle challenges because it's easy. We do these bills and these movements because they are right. Now, I'm a member of the Appropriations and the Budget Committee, and at those committees, we're fighting to ensure that government understands the reality of climate change and takes action to address it. Because here's the fundamental rule. When our environment is degraded and polluted, our children pay the price with their own health, for starters. I know firsthand, and let me just tell you a quick personal story. I grew up in El Paso, Texas, during the days, of course, of segregation and redlining. And it was communities of color, African Americans and Latinos, who were forced to live in the worst, most polluted parts of town. The worst polluter growing up was a copper smelter and refinery in El Paso, very close to where I lived. It was absolutely toxic. A study from the CDC later found that half of the children living within a mile of the smelter where I lived had levels of lead in their blood 4 times the limit of what's considered safe. Now, these children, of course, were my playmates, my family, and my neighbors. They were being poisoned. We were being poisoned. My family, my sister has multiple sclerosis. My grandfather had major lung issues. My mother developed COPD, and it was directly related to growing up in a neighborhood with this smelter. And so I tell this story as a cautionary tale, as a wake-up call regarding the consequences of inaction in the face of environmental degradation. Many of my friends and playmates, they have passed away or have serious diseases as a result of living where we lived in El Paso. Right now, there is no greater threat to our planet and our health and our children's health than climate change. So the time has passed for inaction. The time for half-measured measures, that's passed. This is a climate emergency, and we need to sound the alarm. We've seen these climate emergencies now. We've seen the horror of record storms which ravaged the Gulf Coast, in Florida, Puerto Rico, U.S. Virgin Islands, Texas, and now in Northern California, near my congressional district. Historic fires have killed dozens and left thousands homeless. Again, the reality is, if we don't do anything to address climate change, these natural disasters will worsen. More will lose their homes and their livelihoods and their lives. And so this legislation, again, is the strongest climate bill that we have. It creates jobs while ending our fossil fuel dependence and eliminating shameful, which they are, shameful giveaways to big oil. It is a roadmap for climate progress, and just thank you again for this really great bill. I'm really proud to be part of that. Thank you again, and thank all of you. Or as we say in California, stay in woke.
I am proud to introduce the next speaker, who is the New York coordinator of Casa Pueblo, a Puerto Rican advocacy and environmental organization. David Galarza has been on the front lines for many, many years, and he's here to tell us about what's going on in Puerto Rico.
Thank you. Buenos dias.
Yes.
Buenos dias.
Yes.
Thank you, Congresswoman, for this epic piece of legislation. Coming from an island surrounded by a big ocean, it's, you know, it means a lot to us, obviously, in Puerto Rico. That you come from an island from a big ocean as well. And thank you, Food and Water Watch. I had the pleasure of working with you all in New York City when we were fighting a 92-mile-long gas pipeline in Puerto Rico that we successfully defeated. Give yourselves a hand. So today we're here because we want to pass, we need everybody to sign on to OFF, something that's in dire need. We're in dire need of two kinds of OFF actually in Puerto Rico right now, the kind that repels mosquitoes, and this legislation OFF, which repels all kinds of disaster capitalists and vultures like those in the fossil fuel industry. Today, 5 weeks after a Category 4 Hurricane Maria slammed into Puerto Rico, 3.5 million U.S. citizens, that's right, 3.5 million U.S. citizens remain without life-giving water, food, and even basic medicines. It's shameful, embarrassing, and outrageous. Let's not forget that Puerto Rico was already an environmental disaster long before this catastrophe. With 23 Superfund sites, landfills that are out of compliance, and its overall reliance on dirty and expensive fossil fuels, it's no wonder that the EPA pulled out its personnel right after the storm, citing it was too dangerous for them. This is not the time to abandon Puerto Rico. This moment offers a unique opportunity to approach climate disaster with a regenerative economics and environmental strategy. And it needs to be led by the people to ensure a just recovery and a resilient rebuilding. That's what Casa Pueblo has been doing for years. It's an organization up in the hills of Juntas in Puerto Rico. For 40 years, they've been leading the good fight, not just on behalf of Juntas, that town, but indeed on behalf of all of Puerto Rico. On behalf of the people in Vieques that still need a cleanup after 70 years of naval bombing of that island with napalm and uranium pellets and all kinds of weapons of mass destruction. They fought against two multinational mining companies that wanted to wreak havoc in the center of the island. And most recently, like I said, defeated a boondoggle of a 92-mile-long gas pipeline that would have destroyed half the island. Puerto Rico is only 100 miles by 35 miles. Imagine a 92-mile-long gas pipeline going through the center of Puerto Rico. I was proud to be with the founders of Casa Pueblo not too long ago here, in front of the White House, to get arrested on behalf of the Keystone, fighting against the Keystone Pipeline, but also highlighting the issue of what they call the Via Verde, the Greenway pipeline in Puerto Rico. All these misnomers in Puerto Rico. So I'm proudly here on behalf of the people in Puerto Rico, on behalf of Casa Pueblo, to support this piece of legislation. We call on all members of Congress, obviously, to support this too. Climate chaos is very real. We see it in Puerto Rico. I can go back to those Superfund sites right now as we speak. This is Food and Water Watch. We know from our Native American brothers and sisters that water is life. As we speak today, because there is no water in some of these towns, people are going to Superfund sites and tapping wells to get water for their families. God knows what's going to happen in 10, 20 years. Talking about Congressman Barbara Lee about the cumulative the effects that this kind of contaminants are going to have on our families in the future. So Casa Pueblo is going to continue to educate folks in the island and beyond about just transitions to clean, renewable forms of energy that protect the earth, promote good jobs, and promote healthy democratic governance and decision making. Finally, I'd be remiss because it's in all the papers, it's in all the media today. And I said before about a small island. How is it that a small island like Puerto Rico, surrounded by a big ocean, is importing tainted, expensive white fish from Montana at the tune of $300 million? It makes no sense whatsoever when the people of Casa Pueblo and other people around the country and the planet are spending less than $10 to send things like this, renewable light bulbs powered by the sun, to light people's homes in Puerto Rico, to light people's businesses. This is the kind of future that we need in Puerto Rico. This is the kind of future that we need in Hawaii. This is the kind of future that we need in Brooklyn, where I live. This is the kind of future that we demand, because we demand a just transition and a just future for future generations. Thank you.
We are very grateful that Robin Harris has taken time to come here to Washington today from Florida. She's with Organize Florida, which is a statewide organization that fights for racial, economic, social, reproductive, and Latino justice. And this is a group that believes that anyone who works hard and plays by the rules deserves a fair shot at the American dream. Robin lives and organizes in Orlando, but she has family and friends that have been impacted by the storms in Texas. Robin.
Woo! Good morning, everyone. And thank you all for having me. And as she pointed out, yes, I am with Organize Florida, proud member. However, approximately 2 months ago, I went to visit my family just as myself, experienced some downtime. I went to Texas as a daughter, as a friend, and as a sister, and as a cousin to celebrate my godfather's 80th surprise birthday party. But unfortunately, what happened during my time there was the most catastrophic moments in my life ever, and it's changed my life. And I said and I spoke there to family members, seniors, that I would never, ever fail to speak about the things that I saw and witnessed. As Harvey continued to pallet us, we were devastated with waters up to our stomach, and we were always on standby evacuation. But as the days went by, my sister and others, we went to neighboring towns that's not even on the map, that people have never heard of, that people live out in areas that are disgusting and that they've been forgotten. We went out there daily to pass out water and clothes and to rescue them. Not FEMA, not the Red Cross, but people like you and I were there to help continuously. Looking in senior citizens' eyes, looking at impoverished homes. And I've always known what poverty looks like, but that catastrophic event, now I know what it smells like. And I haven't forgotten that smell. And I'll always speak about that. Being able to leave after about 3 weeks from Texas, only to come back to Florida to face Hurricane Irma. So it's kind of a joke in the light moment that I must attract hurricanes. But returning to another yet catastrophic moment, not quite as severe as in Texas, but as I returned to my home in Orlando, many of my friends, even still now, were without power for weeks. In the black communities, they were without power, food loss, economic loss, wage loss. And no elected official, no governmental official came to the aid. It was people in grassroots opportunities that came and helped out. We need legislation that's going to be there for us. Those two events taught me and raised a consciousness in my mind that marginalized communities, what they are, no more than the government takes our collective trauma and our collective fears and maximize their greed upon. We have nowhere to go. We need legislation that's going to protect us and keep us safe from oligarchs and cronies that takes people's fears and loss and make them their own greed. We have to stand up for each other. And I learned this through these two events, that without you and I, that the real narratives would get lost. What these events taught me is that the nonprofit industrial complexes will silence the real stories and narratives and make them and sanitize them. We need people to speak up and speak out. We need to know that when we transition from our jobs, because because we speak up and speak out, that we'll still be protected. We need our elected officials to stand by us and stand with us to be free from all of this scrutiny. Because what I noticed that happened was even when FEMA did come, even when Red Cross did come, they were coupled with over-policing and paramilitary tactics. What does that say to black communities? That they really don't care about us unless we become a ground for breeding their greed. We need true legislation. We need the voices of government to stand up and be behind us. So I ask you today to stand and support this piece of aggressive legislation that will keep us safe, pure, healthy, and clean.
I'm very pleased to introduce Rita Collins, who is a proud member of National Nurses United. She has been nursing for more than 40 years. She's a bedside nurse at Washington MedStar Center, and she is a graduate of Stony Brook in New York. Rita.
Good morning. My name is Rita Collins, and I'm a registered nurse, an active member of National Nurses United and its Environmental Climate Justice Committee. Thank you for being here to support our progressive Congress members fighting with nurses and ordinary citizens for a healthy planet. Nurses at the bedside see the daily impacts that pollution and toxic emissions caused by our reliance on fossil fuels have on our health. We understand that public health is directly affected by climate change. Whether it is an increased incidence of asthma and respiratory illnesses, extreme weather events that devastate lives, or a range of other problems, nurses are climate first responders. Nurses across the country understand that we are entering a climate emergency with grave effects on public health and safety and the future of society as a whole. For example, extreme climate events that kill so many and leave wreckage in their wake are increasing. Just this month, NNU members working with the Registered Nurse Response Network spent weeks providing aid to help the people of Puerto Rico who were hurt and whose communities were devastated by Hurricane Maria. Nurses know climate change is endangering public health. As a nation, we have an obligation to step up climate action to protect public health for all of us for generations to come. The OFF Act will do this. Some say we must choose between our jobs and the environment, but nurses know there are no jobs on a dead planet. It's also very important that we have a just transition to renewable energy that will create good jobs with a real future. The OFF Act also recognizes the need to place racial and economic justice at the forefront of the climate fight. Low-income communities and communities of color are being impacted first and worst by global warming right now. Together, we can ensure a just transition away from the use of dangerous fossil fuels that can contribute to climate change, and we can create a better planet for our children and grandchildren. Nurses will continue to fight at the bedside and beyond to advocate for the health of our patients, our communities, and our planet. Thank you.
It's a real pleasure to introduce Delegate Shane Robinson from Maryland. He has been an amazing ally. Back in 2013, when people kind of laughed at us when we said we're going to ban fracking in Maryland, Shane Robinson introduced the first ban fracking bill. And of course, this year in Maryland, we did all ban fracking. Shane Robinson was also the very first elected official in the country to sign the pledge for the 100 by 35 bill.
Thanks, Winona. Thanks everybody for having me. It's a real pleasure and honor to be here. I'm a delegate in Maryland. I represent Montgomery County, or part of it, so just next door. But sometimes it seems like it's 1,000 miles away. But I'm just so thrilled that this piece of legislation has been introduced by Representative Gabbard. I want to echo that it's not only epic, it is the best piece of legislation ever. So thank you for putting it in. And thanks to all of her colleagues for also sponsoring. After this, I'm going to go make sure that everybody else in Maryland sponsors this. And finally, thank you to Food and Water Watch for supporting this and pushing us to act in this way, because this bill really does cut through the noise that we see in politics in the United States, and it goes right to the heart of the crisis that humanity is facing right now. This is the bill that we need to be talking about. Nothing else. This is it. And it affects states as well. Maryland, though we're small, we only have about 6 million people. We have about 3,000 miles of coastline. So we're pretty vulnerable to sea level rise too, and to climate change. And I'm so proud of states like Hawaii and California for already taking steps towards 100%. We want to do that too on the East Coast. This is a huge population center. And to really have an impact as a country, we've got to do it here as well. We're not seeing a lot of action, so we're going to start in Maryland. We were able to ban fracking, so we're capable of taking strong steps towards combating climate change, but we need your help, and we need the help at the national level. So it's another reason why I'm so thrilled that Representative Gabbard put this in, because I can point to this legislation when I'm speaking to my colleagues, and not only that, when I'm speaking to other environmental organizations in Maryland that want to do something. They know the crisis we're facing, but they're worried about politics. They're worried about upsetting the apple cart, so they're only going for 50%, and that is not enough. We have to go to 100%. We know that this is not an engineering or a scientific problem. As Winona said, it's a political problem. So let's solve this political problem right here and right now for the betterment of everybody on this planet. So thank you very much for having me, and have a great day.
Thank you, Delegate Robinson, for your leadership and for taking the time to be here today. That bell was the votes bell, so I'm going to have to run to catch votes here in a couple of minutes. But before I go, I really want to say thank you again to Winona and all her Food and Water Watch team who are here today, and those across the country who are working in their communities. Thank you for your leadership and your activism. I want to say thanks to David from Casa Pueblo. You have shared the power of the voices of the Puerto Rican people and the direness of the need of people in Puerto Rico, but the need for this legislation and how it impacts our island communities and communities across the country. Robin, thank you for being here from Organized Florida to share your own personal experiences of yourself and your families about how in our underserved communities and communities of color, we have seen the disproportionate impacts of climate change that will go on for years if we don't take action. And last but not least, thank you, Rita from National Nurses United. You and your crew are active and at the forefront of this and so many other important issues. I always see the red shirts there, and you are making a difference, so thank you so much. We have our work cut out for us. We have heard the compelling reasons today for why this bill is urgently necessary, why we must get our colleagues to co-sponsor this bill. For those who are watching, call your member of Congress and make sure that they are a co-sponsor of this legislation. If there are any questions, Winona's going to stick around to answer any details about the specifics of the bill or further actions that can be taken. Thank you for being here.